Welcome. Before we begin, please be aware that our discussions on mental health issues may include sensitive topics and situations that could be triggering to some listeners. Listener discretion is advised, and if you find these subjects distressing, we encourage you to seek support or skip episodes that may be uncomfortable for you. Your well-being is important to us. Hey beautiful people, it's me, your host, Katelyn Curran. I know it's been a minute. I had another one of those months where things were just kind of crazy. So I know at the end of the year, 2023, I had kind of slowed down on posting my own episodes. And then I had also taken a break at the beginning of this year, and just didn't really upload at all. And, obviously I've just done that again. In the beginning of this year, I no longer had any backlogged episodes with guests, and I hadn't recorded anything new of my own story or with new guests, so I didn't really have anything to upload, and I really just needed that break. So I'm so sorry for everyone that does follow regularly that's kind of probably wondering, where the hell is she? What the hell is going on? I haven't really even posted on, Healing Echoes socials to kind of update you guys on why I've kind of disappeared. And so for that, I definitely do want to apologize. I never want it to come across like I don't appreciate my listeners. No matter if there's only one of you or if there's 500 or 10,000, it doesn't matter. I really want each and every one of you to know that I do appreciate how much energy you put in to being listeners and viewers if you watch on YouTube. And so yeah, I just want to apologize that I haven't really even updated you guys on what's been going on. But I will add some clarity to that now. I did take some more personal time just because as many of you do know, I am neurodivergent, but I'm there's this thing going around social media right now where you list all of the things that make you neurodivergent and then you count them to show your neurodivergence level. So I jokingly say that I'm a level 7 now because I technically have so many things that make me fall under the umbrella of being a neurodivergent. So I am autistic, I am ADHD, so ADHD is usually how most people would say that. I have PMDD, I have CPTSD, I have anxiety, I have depression, so many things that make me fall under that umbrella term of neurodivergence. And I point that out because being neurodivergent, it is much easier for me to experience burnout or overwhelm, and that's definitely what has happened this last month. So I've had a lot going on personally and professionally as well, just some shifts and things, and it definitely led to being very, very overwhelmed. I know we all are aware that life happens, and life has just really been lifing for me this last month. It was my middle daughter's birthday. She turned 8 on May 12th. Woohoo! I can't believe she's 8. And she was my first biological child. So I have been a mom for 8 years now, which just feels absolutely incredible. And also where have the years went all at one time. But yeah, so the month kind of started there for me, and then it was Mother's Day, and I had a lot of personal stuff going on. As a lot of people know, I am going to court with that daughter's biological dad, and so there's just been a lot of back and forth with, motions being filed and tension between him and communication, and it was just a lot. Me and my husband had a lot going on here at home. Like I said, changes in jobs and things like that. So it's just been a really stressful month. And I had to decide to pull back somewhere in order to have energy to, give to my family and to myself and to figure things out. And unfortunately, that meant pulling back from the podcast. I just didn't have the energy or the time to really give. And it's also really important to me that when I do record, especially, well, really either way, whether I'm recording with myself or with a guest, it's really, really important for me that I am offering you guys the best version of me and really giving from a good place. And so when I know that I don't have the spoons to do that, I kind of pull back. So that's what happened. I needed to pull back. I needed to decide how many spoons I had and what was most important for me to use those spoons on. But I'm back. And actually, because of something that just happened yesterday, I decided that the topic that we'll actually be discussing today is like online. How do I want to say this? Hold on, let me find the words. So I had experience with like online dating and grooming online, obviously when I was a child. So I want to talk about my experience with the online world today, but for context, why this got brought up for me is because yesterday my older son decided that he was going to create an Instagram without permission, and he is only 12, and so we really don't like them having those social media platforms because we aren't able to monitor them as closely. And then for those who don't know, in the state of Florida, our governor actually just passed a law that minors are not allowed to have social media. So we were like, nip that in the bud, like, not gonna happen. But just trying to explain to him that, like, we're not allowing you to have social media because we don't think you're mature enough for it. But it's not solely for that reason. It's not because we're trying to make your life difficult. We make these decisions based on what we think is best for you and your safety and your overall well-being. And who his parents are in this household, we really know firsthand. So his dad works with computers, my husband. He's an IT professional. So he definitely knows firsthand just how dangerous and ugly the interwebs can be. And then I know firsthand, as someone who was groomed, as someone who had a profile lying about their age at 13. Like, I know just how dark and terrible a place that the internet can be. So with that happening, we really tried to, like, explain to him, we love you, and we'll revisit this when you're a little bit older. We're not doing this to make your life miserable. I know that's probably how it feels at 12. Your boring parents just won't let you have any fun. And so this morning, I was like, oh my God, this is the topic that I will pick up, back up the episodes with, since I do have firsthand knowledge with it. And I don't think it's something I've really touched on in the podcast yet or in any of my postings of my trauma. And it also points out another thing for me, which is something I notice pretty regularly with what I'm doing, is that when I'm reflecting on my life and I try to touch on all of the topics or things that I've experienced, I do tend to forget entire things that I've went through. And I attribute this to two factors. One, when trauma happens, we do tend to block it out depending on how traumatic it was and if our mind thinks we can handle it. And two, I've just experienced so much trauma over the span of my 27, 28 year life that it's almost impossible for my brain to remember it all and be able to pull it all up in one sitting. It really does have to be triggered by specific topics or conversations for me to be like, oh my God, that's right. That's an entire thing that I've experienced. So, yeah, it's really not until people bring up how dangerous the internet is for minors, or they bring up online dating, that I'm like, oh, this is something that I have firsthand knowledge on. So,
now that I've said all that, I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is exactly that I did and why I have this firsthand knowledge. But pause for a second. I need to get a drink because my throat is drying out. I have been sick since Friday, and it's all in my sinuses and in my throat. So, uno momento. Wonderful. Okay, so I too was not allowed to have social media. And if you think back to when I was a child, so I was born in 1996. And there was like video games, and there were the, old box desktops. There weren't really, like fancy laptops and tablets and all the fancy cell phones that we have of today's age. But even that being said, my household, we were really raised behind the times. My parents didn't like technology. We were raised poor, so we really didn't have the money for a lot of technological things anyways. So like I didn't have a cell phone growing up. We had one TV in the household. I think my brothers had like the old school PlayStation. We didn't have a home computer until I want to say until I was 13. I might have been 12 right before my 13th birthday. But I know that my interaction online started at 13. And I still remember the night that the computer was brought into our home. And I remember because it was like an argument. And so it sticks in my memory. It sticks out. So my dad specifically absolutely hated technology. He thought that it was, well, still does think that it is the doom of society, especially like any type of social media. He didn't see the point to it. He thought it caused a lot of drama and unnecessary like headache. And I don't completely disagree with him there. I do think that technology has greatly improved our lives in many, many ways. I think that social media can be an amazing thing, both personally and professionally. But I also see the cons to it, so it's a double-edged sword, But yeah, so my mom didn't really like it either, but she definitely was leaning more towards like viewing all of the positives about it, or just understanding that you kind of have to adjust to the times. Where my dad was like, no, technology is the devil. I don't know what it was. I don't know if they had a conversation about it, or maybe my older brothers were like, come on, Dad, it's not all that bad. But I remember one specific evening he had been drinking pretty heavily, and my mom didn't even want him to be driving, but he'd run into the house and grabbed the van keys and was like, I'll be back. And didn't tell her where he was going, and he jumped in the van and he drove into town. And apparently he drove up to the Best Buy and he bought a home computer. And he came back and he like just brought it in the house. And I just remember my mom being bewildered. She was like, what is this, James? Like, we can't afford this right now. And he was just so proud of himself. He had, the modem and all the things, and he thought he knew how to set it up, and he was just so stoked to have this home computer. And I don't think he had any idea that probably was the worst thing he could have done at that time frame, because this was when my parents' marriage was already falling apart. Because I think they were legally divorced by the time I was like 14. So they'd already like separated once at this point. I was really, really acting out at this point because of the back and forth and the escalation in my dad's drinking, as well as all the other abuses that I had been suffering. I was really acting out at this point because I know now that my acting out was a cry for help, but it was being ignored. And so with this new computer in my home, which allowed me to connect with the outside world in a way that I had never been presented before, I couldn't wait to get on. So it started with just an AOL account, just an email account. But as many of you probably remember, AOL had chat rooms. And I don't remember what chat room it was in, but through AIM, AOL Instant Messenger, is how I met my first, like, what I considered my first boyfriend when I was 13. It was just some kid from Ohio, you know? And what's funny enough is I still remember his name to this day, and I won't say it. You know, I like to allow people their privacy, but it's just so funny how certain things I can remember like they were yesterday, and other things are just, they're lost, you know? But yeah, I would have an online romance with this kid for at least a year. And, you know, we instant messaged as much as we could. I'd get on every day for like an hour, and I was supposed to be like using it for my school and stuff like that. And so I would always have like a tab up in the background so that if my mom came in the office, she would think I was doing whatever, you know, she was asking me to do. But I was emailing back and forth with this kid. I was instant messaging back and forth with him. I was telling him all the things that were going on in my home, and he cared. And it was just like, wow, there's somebody out there, even if they're literally on the other side of the country, who gives a shit about me and gives a shit about my trauma. And like, he was older than me. I think when I was 13, he was 15, almost 16. So even then, yeah, I was probably being groomed. And looking back at who he was and how he interacted with me, he definitely had an attraction for younger people. And I'm not going to badmouth this person because I don't know what they were going through. I do remember, according to our conversations, they were also mentally ill. They also were traumatized, not to excuse their behavior. But I don't know who they became. I don't know if they got help. I don't know if that was definitely a sign that maybe they were a predator. I have no idea. I know at the time, even though I was a couple years younger than them, they definitely were still a child, and they definitely needed help too. So I can only hope that they got that help. But that's kind of where it started. And then, I don't remember my age exactly. I think I was about 14. Because my dad was out of the house by the time it escalated. So, me and that guy that I initially connected with, the one I consider my first boyfriend, we had taken it from instant messaging to phone calls. We had a landline. I did not have a cell phone yet. I didn't have a cell phone until I was like 16. And at the time, I did not realize that we did not have long distance calling. This is all such a throwback. And like I said, he lived in Ohio. And I would wait until my parents had went to bed, and then I would call him. And unfortunately, quite a few times, I was on the phone for like an hour, or I would fall asleep on the phone. And so I was just racking up that phone bill, right? And my mom had already started to notice that something was up because, so we had a landline, but we had the ones that would like sit in the cradle to charge. And we had 3 of them. So we had one in our living room, one in like our dining room / kitchen area, and then one in the office. And so she would always notice that in the morning, one had been put back on the cradle, but was completely dead. And she was like, why does this keep happening? Like, is it not getting put back on the charger? But she was very, very suspicious. My mom paid very close attention to things like that, and she, in that sense, definitely was not stupid. She knew something was going on, she just didn't know what, and she didn't know how to prove it. Until they got the phone bill. And I had racked up like a $300 to $400 charge because of all the calls to and from Ohio. And it was the first experience I ever had with debt because my mom was not going to pay for that. So she came in and she was like, first of all, who lives in Ohio? Why are you calling them in the middle of the night or late at night? And you now owe me money. So I just told her who it was. I was like, this is a friend that I met online. I can give you his information. She did look him up. She did reach out to his parents. They knew about me. They were fine with him having a friendship with me. So at that time, I didn't lose contact with him. I just was only allowed to call him when I asked for permission, or instant message, and she really did start to monitor like how much or how often I was talking to him. She still didn't like read my messages or anything like that, so I don't think she understood at that point that it was romantic and inappropriate. So we'd also taken it to the point of like what sexting was back in the 90s. So but yeah, I owed her. She was like, you're gonna work off this charge, you're gonna pick up odd jobs from the neighbors, you're gonna babysit, you're gonna do whatever you have to do to help contribute to this, because we don't have it and you ran it up, so you have to pay it off. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, yes, I was like 13 or 14, but it's no different than, you know, well, anything else like that. I don't think that I would disagree with that line of parenting. You know, that's an incredible amount of money for the level of poverty that my family was in. So I think in that sense, money-wise, she definitely handled it how she should have. As far as like reading my messages and things like that, I always go back and forth, because I am a parent myself now, and I don't read my kids' text messages. I do think there is a level of invading privacy, but also wanting to monitor. I do think having the software on their phones that like catches certain words or certain phrasing or certain conversations, I think like things like that are incredibly important to have. I don't know technology-wise what kind of software like that even existed then. I have no idea. So I don't really know what my mom could have been doing more so than actually just reading my messages. So I don't really fault her for that either. I'm sure that's something she does look back on and regrets not knowing. But we did, I did eventually tell her that like I considered him my boyfriend, and it was at that point that she had let my dad move back in from their official physical separation. And I remember it was a fight over this online boyfriend that would cause me to move out at 14. So my dad had moved back in, and I was very, very angry. And I think what caused the argument now, it's funny because as I'm talking to you guys, certain facts and memories are actually coming up as we talk. So if I'm not mistaken, what caused the argument that day was that my mom had actually read some of our emails to each other and found some of the sexually explicit ones. And like, again, they were emails, so there was like no pictures or anything, but we were definitely being inappropriate, especially for our age. And so I think she'd come in to like the living room and sat me down. And my dad was mad. He was already like yelling at me. Like, I don't even remember what he was saying to begin with, but especially walking in and being yelled at. And no one's going to be receptive to that, but especially who I was as a teenager, especially as angry as I was at my mom for letting my dad move back in. I hated my dad at that time. Like, I remembered what he did. He walked around pretending like he had no idea the ways that he abused me. So, like, walking into the living room and having him already, like, snapping at me, I was not receptive to it at all. I was immediately on defense. It was immediately like, fuck you guys. Which is not a way I would have ever talked to my parents. We were very respectful kids. It was just how we were raised. It never really ever crossed my mind to not respect my parents. But we were also, you know, severely punished if we weren't respectful, or if we ever did anything they deemed disrespectful. So it was just how life was, you know? So, but at this point, all of that went out the window. I didn't care anymore. I was too old to be spanked. I'd already been grounded. I hated my life. I hated them. Like, I didn't really think there was anything they could do to me at that point that would make me care. But yeah, the thing that stands out in this argument is that my mom did kind of keep trying to bring the energy down, like in a sense of like de-escalate, and just be like, hey, like, stop yelling at her. Let me explain, Katelyn, what I'm saying, why it's not okay, why I'm having to make this decision. All my dad is doing is yelling, and he's getting in my face, and he's like, you know, you can't have a boyfriend at 13, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, yeah, I can. Like, I love him. And we'll get to that in a second. But my dad was like, you can't love somebody at 13. You don't even know what love is. And I remember standing up off of the love seat that I was sitting on, and because he was in my face anyway, so I was like, I'm going to stand up because you're not going to be in my face and above me. So I stood up and I was like, and you do? To my dad, because he just told me I didn't know what love was. And I'm like, how are you going to sit here and tell me I don't know what love is, and as if you do? You're divorcing my mom after 28 years because you're an alcoholic and you can't stop being an alcoholic to save your marriage. You abuse her in many, many ways. You abuse your children. You abuse me. I'm just keeping quiet about it. Like, who are you to tell me that I can't possibly know what love is in a romantic form, and that I don't know what it is simply because of my age? Like, I was not having it. And so going back to the statement of, like, me saying I love this person, as an adult now, I think that invalidating the love that teenagers or preteens feel is wrong. Do I think it is a mature love? Of course not. Do I think it is a love that completely understands how complicated love and life is? Of course not. They're 13. But do I think that means that they don't know when they love somebody? No, of course they know when they love somebody. If a 13-year-old is capable of loving their parents, of loving their siblings, of loving their friends, their family members, then why are they incapable of feeling romantic love? They're not. They are completely capable of feeling romantic love. Is it like I said, is it the mature, life-knowing, experience-having love that a 35-year-old would feel? No, because they're 13. But to tell them that they couldn't possibly love someone in a romantic sense, just to me isn't accurate. And like I said, I'm a parent. I have a 12-year-old. I have a 14-year-old. And if they told me that they felt romantic love for someone, I would believe them. And, you know, I would still want them to handle it properly. I'd be like, okay, well, we're not going to go run away and marry this person or just jump into being sexually active at 14. Like, there's steps that we have to take. Just because we feel emotion towards this person doesn't mean that we lose all sense. And that's where the parent in me comes out. I'm not that 13-year-old girl in love with somebody I've never met anymore. But it's a balance. And my parents did not have that balance. My father certainly did not have that balance, which is not surprising. But it was this argument, to kind of get back on course, it was this argument that would cause me to move out at 14. Because he told me I didn't know how to love. And I told him, like, and you do? You know what love is? You know what it is to healthily love someone? Come on. And I refused. I was like, no, I'm gonna stay in contact with this person. Like, if it's not online, that's fine. But we also sent letters to each other. Like, I'm gonna have a way to contact this person. I'm not giving him up for you. And so, yeah, I was like, I am absolutely not gonna give him up. And my dad said, that's fine. If you think you can make the decisions, then you can get the fuck out of my house. The anger, I look back now and all I can do is laugh, because it was so stereotypical, dysfunctional family. Even if you took the childhood sexual abuse out of the equation, he was an alcoholic, he'd been abusive, they were getting a divorce, they'd separated physically, he'd moved back in, like, so dysfunctional to tell your 14-year-old that they have to get out, to move out at 14, girl or boy, doesn't matter, to tell your 14-year-old child that they have to move out if they're not going to follow your rules is not the answer. But I was over it. I was so pissed that my mom had let him move back in anyways that I was like, okay. And I went to my room and I started packing my shit. I'm not even joking, you guys. I had like 2 duffel bags and I went through my things and I was like, what do I absolutely need? And then I got the house phone and I called my oldest brother, because my oldest brother lived like 5 streets down, not streets, 5 houses down on the same street. And I was like, I need to come down there, even if it's for the night. Like, Dad's kicking me out. And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah, we got into a fight over my boyfriend and he's kicking me out. And he was like, okay, like, you can come down here. And like, during the argument, when my dad had said that, my mom did interject and was like, we're not kicking her out, James. Like, we can't kick out our 14-year-old. It's funny because she didn't really even argue, like, that's not the answer or that's not the solution. It was more of like we can't get rid of her. She's 14. And this is where I really started to feel like my mom really didn't care what happened to me. She wasn't saying like, oh, well, we can't do that because it's not right. It was more like, she's 14. We're her parents. We have to at least house her until she's an adult. Like, the actual care and empathy to want to help me and help me understand why they were making the decisions they were making, it wasn't there. The only thing she cared about in this time frame of my life was trying to fix her relationship and her marriage. She absolutely stopped giving a shit about the 2 kids that she had remaining in the household, which would be me and my older sister. And my older sister at this point was like 15 or 16. She already had a part-time job. Like, and my sister was always on track. She never did anything that my mom didn't like. So I really was the problem child, and she really didn't give a shit. She was kind of throwing her hands up at this point. All her focus was going into my dad and trying to restore their marriage. And so I was just like, you don't really even want me here. You're legit telling him that you can't throw me out because I'm a minor, not because it's a fucked up thing to do. I'm leaving. So I did. I went and stayed. I don't remember exactly how long, but I went and stayed with my brother and his wife for like a month, I think. This was his first wife, and she is his ex-wife now. He's remarried. This is a person that I would have trauma with in the years to come, actually. So it's not the greatest thing that I went to his house. And for the listeners who don't remember or don't know, maybe this is your first episode, my oldest brother also molested me when I was 6. However, I never held it against him as a child, and we tended to have a pretty good relationship, so I felt safe at his home. It wasn't a safe environment, not from him. He was fine. My brother's never ever done anything to me in the future since, well, not in the future, but whatever. From when I was 6 on, he never did anything to me again. So he never did anything inappropriate. He never made me feel uncomfortable. It was his ex-wife. So she definitely was an unhealthy person. She definitely targeted me. She was just very immature. She would talk to me about how, she thought my mom was jealous of me, and that's why she targeted me the way she did. And she's not completely wrong there. There definitely was that dynamic that mothers seeing their daughters as competition is definitely what happened with me and my mom. But it really was not appropriate for her to be telling me that as an adult when I was 14. And it just wasn't her place. She definitely encouraged very rebellious behavior. It was while I was staying with them that she would actually take me to Claire's, of all places, to go get my ears pierced. Because I'd always wanted my ears pierced, and my mom wouldn't let me. I wasn't allowed to wear tampons. My mom didn't allow me to wear tampons because she was afraid it would ruin my purity. And so while I was staying with my brother, I got on my period and I was allowed to wear tampons there. It would actually be the first time I ever had any experience with them, which was also traumatic, but that's a different story for a different time. But yeah, I think I stayed there for like a month. I was homeschooled, so I just brought my school books with me and would show my mom my progress. My mom would come down to where my brother lived, a couple houses down, and would check on me every couple of days. And then I went home, and I don't remember when I went home, if it was because all the adults sat down and were like, this is not going to work. Like, that's her house. She needs to be there. Like, my brother and his wife had kids, so, like, they couldn't take me on, and it wasn't their responsibility to take me on. And then it just makes me so sad recounting this, because I never really realized until literally this moment that this memory played a huge part in my abandonment issues and in my just feeling completely unwanted. My parents didn't want me. My brother didn't want me. Like, he wanted to help, but he couldn't, and he didn't want to raise me, and I don't fault him for that. But, like, where was I to go? So I had to go back to a house that I hated, to live with people that I felt like hated me, and they might have. And that experience is what would take me into my next experience with the internet and how dangerous it is. So I think it was around 15, between my 14th and 15th year, because I know I was 14 when I lived with my brother. So it was between my 14th and my 15th year that I had moved back home, and I discovered online dating. And at the time, again, thinking of what year it was, at the time there weren't apps. They were just websites. And the first website I ever discovered was Plenty of Fish. And anyone that knows anything about online dating, especially in that time frame, probably has heard of it. Plenty of Fish still exists. But it is one of the shittier sites. And actually, I found this out at a later time, that Plenty of Fish is the #1 site for pedophilia and human trafficking. And it would be just my luck that it would be that site I would use to create a online dating profile and pretend to be older than I was. And I was on it for a while before my mom caught me. So I used my name, I used my location, I used my pictures. The only thing I lied about was my age. So again, by like 15 or 16, I looked about 18. I developed very young. I carried myself very maturely. And yeah. What I didn't do though on this site is I didn't put just 18. I felt like I had to be a little bit older than that or people would not be interested in me. Hold on, let me get another drink. So what I would do instead of putting 18 is I would put 22. And yeah, I could pass for 18, 19. I did not pass as 22. And so I have absolutely no doubt in my mind that the men that would message me were fully aware that I was a minor. I, at the time, was convinced that I had everybody fooled. And so that they weren't technically in the wrong. But now, as an adult, I can look back and be like, no, honey. They either were complete idiots, which does happen. That does happen. But the majority of them, sis, they completely knew that you were a minor and they were preying on you. And they used the fact that you were confident that you had them fooled so that they didn't have to admit that they were pedophiles. But yeah, I was on there for a while. I had conversations with quite a few different men before my mom would catch me. Again, I would always like leave a tab up. I knew to delete my history. I was smart with it. I would get on the computer when she went to the store. And again, I would time it because we didn't have cell phones still. And I just knew, like, how long it would take her to even get to town, and so I would just time it. The minute I heard her car pull out of the driveway, I'd watch it go down the road, and then I'd run to the office and I'd log in. And then I would always try to time it so that I was off and had time to, like, clear history. But I started pushing it, and I'd get to the point where, like, I could hear the gravel tires, the tires on the gravel, rather, coming down our driveway, and I'd be like, shit, and I'd log out, and I had to clear my history. But I think what happened is that one time I got really brave, and she was supposed to be taking a nap, and I went and I got on the computer, and she must have sensed that something was up, because she got up and I didn't hear her, and she'd walked to the office door, which was open. And when I heard her, I clicked on a different tab, and it was very obvious that I was hiding something. So she was like, what were you just doing? She found out, and she called the cops because she wanted to make sure that nobody that I'd been talking to knew where I was. So for that, like, her actually taking action there was awesome. Again, it's one of those moments where I say, like, this is where I'm actually able to have some sort of sympathy towards my mother, because at certain times she really did try, which is why it's so confusing why she didn't try for other things. But yeah, I remember standing in my driveway having to talk to 2 detectives about what I'd been doing and why it was so dangerous, and like my mom was standing right there, and that's when I found out that Plenty of Fish is the #1 site that they monitor. Yeah, he was like, I don't know if you know this, man, but like Plenty of Fish is actually our #1 site that we monitor for pedophilia and human trafficking. And that was back in, like, fuck, how old was I? Hold on. That was like 2011, 2012. Like, so imagine what it's like now. And this is why it's so terrifying, because I didn't even have, this was on a home computer, right? I didn't even have a cell phone until I was 16. And I got that because I paid for it and I had a job. And I guarantee you that is the only reason my mother allowed me to have a cell phone. And she would go on to regret that. But because I would continue this exact kind of behavior using my cell phone. So now, being a parent in 2024 and having our 14-year-old and our 12-year-old have cell phones is terrifying. It's terrifying. Human trafficking is so much worse. Pedophiles are literally everywhere. I mean, literally, there's documentaries on it. There's apps on it. Like, everything in our culture right now is showing us that they're not few and far between. They are every other person, it seems like. And so, yeah, like, in a sense, I am very thankful that when I did these things, it was back then, where technology isn't what it is now, and maybe that's why I'm still alive. What I attribute it to is that I am divinely protected. Did I have really shitty things happen to me? Sometimes at the hands of my own family members? Yes. But when I explain to you guys the extent that this went to, I am not exaggerating when I say that I should not have only been assaulted, I should have been obliterated, murdered, dismembered. All of the terrible things that you hear on true crime podcasts should have happened to me over and over and over again. So, I got a cell phone at 16. I had a job. I paid for the cell phone. I paid for the monthly bill. By this point, me and my sister was 18, so she was already an adult. She did still live at home, though. But by the time both me and my sister were 16 individually, we were already paying for almost all of our own expenses. Obviously, we didn't pay rent until we were 18, and like my mom would supply food. But when it came to like toiletries, our phone, our cars, our car insurance, our clothes, we paid for all of our own things. And this is something my mom will still argue with me about. She's like, no, you didn't. Me and my sister remember it differently. So, but yeah, so I had a cell phone. And again, she would definitely notice things. So I dropped out of school, I want to say when I was 17. So when I was 16, I was still in school. I was still homeschooled, but I still had an allotted time of day that I was supposed to be doing studies. And so I remember one incident in particular. I had gotten up and I went to go get in the shower, and I left my phone on the toilet, like on the toilet seat. And so she could hear, well, lid, because the lid was shut. I'd like put my clothes on the toilet and my phone, and so you could hear it buzzing, but I'd also left the sound slightly up. And so while I was in the shower, I was getting text messages because I had created new dating profiles, and just like in chats and things, I'd given people my cell phone number. Jesus. And I remember when I got out of the shower, my mom was like, "Who is messaging you?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Your phone was absolutely blowing up. Who is messaging you? Because all of your friends are school age and should either be doing school or should be in school and not allowed on their phones. So why is your phone blowing up like that?" And I don't remember what I told her. I know it was some excuse of like, yeah, one of my friends was homeschooled like me, and so she would have had her cell phone on her, and so I was like, yeah, she's supposed to be doing school, but she's starting later today, and she was asking me some questions about a certain subject or whatever. I played it off. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was something along those lines. So I had spent like my entire 15th year grounded, except for 1 month, and that was because of the computer stuff. So now I'm at 16, and I have a cell phone. I would sneak out at night. My mom worked a newspaper route, and my dad didn't live at home anymore. And so technically in the middle of the night, we were home alone. And so I would wait until she left for work. I'd sleep for like an hour, and I'd set an alarm for when I knew that she was leaving for work. And I would make sure she was gone, and then I'd sneak out, and I'd just make sure that I was back in time before she got back from work. When I was sneaking out with adult men that I had met online. I did have a car. I don't think I had a car yet at this point, and because I didn't want anyone to know I was gone, I wouldn't take my car, because my sister still lived at home, and I didn't want them to hear the car or walk out and not see the car and know I was gone. So I would always have them come pick me up, which again is a sign that they should have known that I was a minor, because I couldn't drive, I didn't have a car, you were picking me up outside my house. Like, we had a gated, fenced-in yard, so instead of them pulling in, I would go meet them on the road, or sometimes even down the road. So they wouldn't even know what house I was coming out of. All of this should have been red flags for them, but this is where, as an adult, I'm like, they knew. They knew you were a minor. They didn't care. They wanted you to be a minor. It wasn't an adult who thought I was another adult and going, this is weird. If she's an adult, why am I picking her up down the street from her house? Yeah, you could argue maybe they thought I was just trying to be safe, but it's not really safe getting in the car with a stranger at fucking 2 a.m., is it? No, it's not. I would sneak out with, like I said, grown men that I'd met on the internet that I knew nothing about for almost a solid year before I got caught. I got caught because I went to this guy's house who I'd met up with him on numerous occasions, so we had established some sort of relationship, and he actually at this point considered me his girlfriend. This man I do feel empathy towards, because this man, I do believe wholeheartedly, was convinced I was an adult. And I say that because he introduced me to his mom. And I think if he thought or had any inkling that I was a minor, he obviously would not have introduced me to his mother. But I went to his house and I fell asleep, and I didn't have him take me back in time. And I woke up, guys, I shit you not, I woke up at 16 at 8 a.m. and I seen that there was sun coming through the windows and my heart went through my ass. I knew my life was over. I ran downstairs to where I'd left my cell phone charging on the counter in the kitchen, and I remember this because I remember looking right at my phone, and this sticks in my memory like it was yesterday. I had 86 missed calls and 87 text messages. These calls and text messages were from my sister, my mother, my dad, and my oldest brother, who had all been looking for me since about 7 a.m. So because I'd fallen asleep, my sister woke up at 6 a.m., 6:30 that morning to go to work, and she didn't have a clean jacket. So she came into my room to borrow one and found that I was not in bed. And she reached out to me first, and she said, I don't know where you're at, but if you answer me before I have to leave for work, I won't tell Mom. Just answer me and get your ass home. I didn't answer because I was sleeping. So she had to tell my mom, and I don't fault her for that at all. I'm glad that she told my mom. So yeah, they never called the cops. I think they were, again, giving me an opportunity to answer or wake up from wherever I was at. But from the time that my sister told them to the time that I answered, I want to say it was about an hour and a half. And they had started going out and looking for me. And I didn't call them back. I was too scared. I just texted and I said, I'm okay. I'm alive. And then my sister-in-law, because my brother was still married to his first wife, my sister-in-law called me and was like, I will come get you. Where are you at? And I, obviously I did not want to get this guy in trouble because I knew that I knew my age, but I was pretty sure he didn't know. He thought I was an adult. So I just, he'd woken up. He's like, you want me to take you home? I was like, no, it's an emergency. It's fine. I'm just going to go. Because I did not want them to have any idea where he, even remotely lived. So I walked out of his house, off his street, and started walking down one of the main county roads near where I lived. It was actually a very popular trucking route, which was very dangerous for me to be walking in the morning by myself. But my sister-in-law, I told her about where I was on this road, and these are all familiar roads to us because it's very rural country area. We know all of the county roads. She came and picked me up, and I spent all day with her. She had to go get her hair done, so I sat in the salon with her for hours, and she allowed me to use my phone during that time to basically contact everyone or all of my friends and be like, my life is over. I don't know how long I'm going to be grounded, but this is my heads up to y'all that you're not going to hear from me for a while. So I did all that. I reached out actually to that first boyfriend I had at 13 because we were still friends. We weren't together anymore, but we were friends, and told him, this is what I went through. I don't know what's going to happen, but you're not going to hear from me for a while. And actually that would be the last time we ever talked to each other. And then I went home, and my life was over. I wasn't allowed to leave the house. I wasn't allowed to have my cell phone. I wasn't allowed to see my friends. They weren't even allowed to, because one of my best friends lived right next door to me. They weren't even allowed to, wave at me over the fence. I was in jail at my house. And I don't blame my mom for that. I mean, she said, I thought we were going to find you in a ditch somewhere. She thought I was dead. And I want to say that kind of behavior stopped there. To that extreme it did. But I definitely, as a young adult, at 18, I met my first biological At 18, I met my first biological daughter's father on a dating app. I met him on OkCupid, That's only 2 years later from all of this happening. But to the extent of how dangerous, it definitely did. I definitely wised up. I didn't meet people in the middle of the night. They knew my age. I sent addresses to a friend or my mom, this is who I'm meeting, this is where I'm meeting them, I'm here, I'm leaving, I checked in, I was safe. I practiced, God, I can't talk now. I've been talking for almost an hour, and all of a sudden I'm going to start stumbling over my words. Whew. I started practicing safe dating, safe online dating, or as safe as you could anyways. once I became a legal adult. And looking back, it's like, just recounting this to you guys is like, it sounds like bullshit, doesn't it? It sounds so insane that it can't be real, but it was. I wanted so badly to be loved. I wanted so badly to get attention. And because of the abuse that I suffered as a child, I thought the only way I could get that attention and that love was through men and through sex. And so for 365 days of my 16th year, I snuck out every single night, and not always with the same person. And almost every single one of them that I snuck out with, I had sex with. And that is something that I've had to process and work through, because purity culture is such a huge thing, especially in Western society, where even when grown women who are sexually active are shamed for the amount of people they sleep with or how they sleep with them. It wasn't until this last year, processing this trauma with my husband, did I realize that that was not consensual. In my head, as the person who contacted these men and wanted to have sex with them, I did not realize that because it was statutory rape, that I was still a victim in this case. I never seen myself as a victim in this case. I have always shamed myself. I have always hated myself and felt disgust for my body, that I literally, because of this specific year, I have no idea how many people I have been sexually active with. And that was something that I never wanted to tell anyone. I would just tell them, like, I don't know, because I don't care, I don't keep count, you know? And I would play it off as empowerment. Not that it isn't. I definitely don't slut shame. I think it is empowerment. I don't think it matters how many people you sleep with, as long as you're safe and they're safe and everyone is consenting. Boo-boo do you, is how I view it. But that's not how I felt then. That's not how I felt with this situation. I hated myself. I thought I was a whore. I thought I was everything that everyone had ever told me I was. And I didn't realize that I became that in a sense, and I was acting as what we define that as, because I'd already been told I was that for so long. You have to understand that my dad and the men that abused me when I was a very little child were already calling me those things. So I had been hearing and having ingrained in my mind that I was a whore and a slut since I was like 6. And then I heard it from my mom, and I heard it from my sister. And sometimes, no, they wouldn't use those specific words, but they were slut shaming and they were body shaming. And I was like, well, if I am these things, then why not embrace it? I was hurting so bad that I was like, well, if this is what I'm good at, if this is the only way that I can be shown affection, then I'm going to be the best at it. And I didn't realize, obviously, I didn't realize at 16 that all I was doing was cutting that wound deeper and deeper and deeper. And man, like, I can't believe this is something I have not addressed yet in telling my story. I've been telling my story since September of 2023, and it never dawned on me that this is such a huge part of it. It's not just the, being victimized by the internet, or the people on the internet, rather, but it is also, yet again, further sexual trauma. And I can't believe I've left it out. So yeah, if you, man, listen, if you have children, please educate them. Please educate yourself on how extremely dangerous the internet is. The outside world is extremely dangerous. I mean, we hear about human trafficking every day, from the gas stations to the stores to school, to the schools that we are supposed to be able to trust our children with. But the internet is so vast, and it can be amazing. It can be the future at our fingertips. It can be knowledge at our fingertips, but it can also be a beast So for yourself, if you're younger or an adult, because adults get trafficked too, adults get victimized as well. For adults, for children, please educate yourselves. Please make sure that you are putting safety nets in place. That is my plea for today.
Thank you for tuning in to Healing Echoes. I hope you found our discussions both insightful and inspiring. Please consider supporting us by subscribing and or leaving a review. Remember that your journey to recovery is a personal echo, unique to you, and filled with the power of transformation. Stay tuned for more episodes, and until then, keep healing, keep growing, and keep sharing your own healing echoes with the world. This is Katelyn, signing off.